and welcome. In this video, we'll be talking about company background. This is primarily focused on how you introduce and develop your business identity, which is incredibly important to introduce early on in your project. We'll be going over 5 main aspects, talking about the business identity breakdown, how you introduce your origin and how you rationalize what you include, your justification, which explains feasibility, viability, and relevancy, how you identify the strategic roles your business needs to take on, and then how you match your level of depth to the model of paper and or business model itself. So first up is structuring your business identity. You're going to want to think of your business identity as like the first impression you make on a judge. And even when we're writing, we always start with our elevator pitch, and that's about 1 or 2 sentences that instantly tells the reader who your business is and who it serves. For example, we might say that Business A upcycles discarded glass into premium home decor for eco-conscious millennials. After that, we want to set up a couple of different things. First is our legal structure. This is going over, are we an LLC, sole proprietorship, a nonprofit, franchise, hybrid, whatever. This choice is going to impact how you pay taxes, raise your funds, and operate. For example, if your business is a franchise, your marketing freedom is going to be more limited, so you would have to mention this later on how it affects your marketing. Additionally, you're going to want to include your founding facts. This is the when, where, and by whom the business was founded. We don't want to go beyond these facts because a lot of students will end up dragging it on, and then this ends up just being overwhelming. The founding facts are not useful unless your business was founded within 10 years ago, because at that point, you're still dealing with growth. For ownership and management, the biggest question here is who's in charge and what's their leadership style. Are there hands-on collaborative systems? If we're trying this for operational strengths, we're generally going to be discussing how team agility works. Once again, this will generally tie back to kind of a mix of your founding and your overall operational style. So if you're a small business, you may not have a large team and you want to talk about that. Or if you're a super, super large business, maybe you talk about how many different branches you have. Try to keep the quantitative factoids pretty low because ownership and management, you're trying to tie this to the actual day-to-day, how it runs, how it works. On that same thread, we have locations. This is just asking where your business is located and then how it's relevant to your market. Because where you're based matters, your location can be centralized to your customer base. Maybe you're near suppliers, so shipping costs are lower. Maybe you're in a trend-forward city, so you end up having a high-frequency interaction rate with your customers. All of these are things to consider. Next up is rationale. We always want to anchor the company in a problem that's worth solving. This includes identifying the needs or opportunities that the company is going to address and what gap in the market it fills. This is the emotional and logical link between your business and the audience. A tactic that can generally be used here is called owner's friction, which refers to how friction, or a hardship or issue that you've noticed in your day-to-day work, inspired the business, and then how that discovered problem evolved into a solution, and then how the solution tied into customer empathy. For example, after saying you struggled to find allergy-friendly baked goods for her son, the founder launched Crumble and Bloom to offer gluten-free pastries without sacrificing taste. In essence, this is what the business is doing for people. And that leads us into justification. When we're trying to justify our business, we're going to ask ourselves the question, what does the reader need to know to believe this business is viable? Too many students overload this with cool but irrelevant details. So we're making sure to only include facts that set up the logic of the following: marketing, operations, and finance plans, and specifically why you choose what you choose. We want to clarify what we're selling, and we have 3 other questions to ask ourselves. Am I offering a product, a service, or hybrid mix? What is really being solved for customers by my business? Why is this better, faster, easier, or more appealing than what's already out there? We never want to just say, we sell candles. Instead, we would want to say something like, we sell locally sourced, toxin-free candles that are designed for sensory-sensitive customers who historically have been an underserved market by major retailers. If you can put in all three of these questions with your answers for justification, you'll have a much stronger argument. Additionally, location is also important in this point. It's not just a fun fact, it's going to impact your customer access, competition, pricing, and even your brand identity, depending on what you're doing. Your location is going to influence strategy, which is who the market is. So even if you have to explain it deeper later, it's generally good to set up your target market, however briefly. When writing their company background section, there are three more good questions to ask yourself when justifying your business. Will this information connect to decisions later on? Does this detail help explain how the business fits into the market? And does this help the judge understand how the business functions? So, let's say that we've talked about the founding story. The strategic role there could be how it helps the judge understand the problem being solved or the customer's pain point. For company structure, the strategic role here is that it provides a legal or operational clarity into what form of business you are, because that's going to influence your limitations and your opportunities. Like we already said, franchises, there's a lot more bureaucratic oversight, so they can't market in every way they want. Versus an LLC, they have the strength of being able to do pretty much anything they want if they're small. But if they're small, they might have a weakness where they don't have enough people to operate a massive international campaign, for example. Mentioning your product or service is going to also be utilized when you're trying to explain what makes you competitive, needed, or new. Your target market is going to explain why your strategy works for a specific audience, and your company values explain how that influences operations and marketing. For example, if your business values sustainability, that means it's going to influence things like packaging, sourcing of materials, marketing tone, maybe even the way you interact with customers later on. And next up, we're going to be matching the level of depth to the business model's complexity. One size does not fit all when it comes to company background sections. We want to make sure that the level of depth we go into in describing your background matches your business model's complexity. For example, if the business only has a few locations or products, it's good to keep the background short but sharp and use good charts to add depth to the little information there might be. If it's community facing or nonprofit, we want to also have sections in our business background where we talk about the mission that we serve and how we carry that out. If there are multiple services, or it's large, or it's a hybrid model, we would want to clarify the overall model for each service or so. However, because there'd be a lot of information with that, we'd probably want to use a lot of charts to clearly separate it out and stay away from long paragraph definitions. In essence, we're keeping our description dynamically tailored to our specific business. Let's talk about some extra tips. First of all, make sure that all of the information you have on your company background can be referred to in other sections. If you have other info, it's good to remove that, at least for the time being. You can add it back in later. Keep it short and snappy to start. Additionally, if you're including outside data points, we want to make sure to avoid being overwhelming. Using charts, tables, and bullet points is an excellent way to do this. Include only one key data point, generally, such as industry growth rates, local stats, influencing economics, behavior trends. Try to keep one data point max per piece of your argument. Generally speaking, you'll end up with about 3 to 5 super good data points. Additionally, you're going to want to make sure that you treat the company background section like it's the anchor of your plan. So it needs to define what the business is, why it exists, and why it works. And then every other section, whether that's marketing, finance, operation, will all flow from this. The key to a good paper is to make everything feel cohesive, and I would argue that doesn't start in the executive summary. It starts in the company background. As always, thank you for supporting us, and we will see you in the next video.